With the most recent episode, Yellowstone has at long last disclosed the complete circumstances surrounding the strange death of John Dutton, played by Kevin Costner. 353. The 11th episode of Season 5 and the third installment of Part 2 moves the main narrative ahead and makes us wonder what hope the Duttons have for maintaining their future, particularly their ranch. This episode is also the third installment of Part 2. We are continuing to devour Taylor Sheridan's flagship Paramount drama, and this week's episode contains a lot of content, so let's go right into it and get started exploring it. The 11th episode of the 5th season of Yellowstone recounts the events that transpired on the night when John Dutton passed away. The film 353 carries up to its name and takes a considerably darker turn after initially flashing back to the conclusion of Beth's Kelly Riley time spent in Texas with Rip Kohlhauser, and then seeing the home that Kayce Luke Grimes, Monica Kelsey Isbell, and Tate Brecken Merrill had all established together. We learn that John Dutton was murdered on the same night that Beth arrived from Texas and the same night that Kayce and Monica completed their house modifications. This information is presented to us here. 3 assassins break into the governor's residence, utilize military-grade moves and resources to sedate John. They inject him between the toes to prevent him from resisting, and then carry him across the hallway and into the bathroom. We watch as they do all of this. There, they shoot him in the head with his own service handgun from the position they are in. Yellowstone gives us the impression that we have witnessed John Dutton being murdered right in front of our very eyes, despite the fact that Kevin Costner is replaced by a body duplicate. At the very moment when John is murdered, Beth has a pain in her chest while she is driving alone. While she is on the phone with Rip, she is aware that it is something else. In a similar manner, Kayce is immediately roused from his sleep by a terrifying dream, which is then immediately followed by a phone call from the Helena Police Department. After Yellowstone has brought us up to speed on the events of the past, the show shifts its focus back to the present, where Jamie, played by Wes Bentley, and Senator Linnell Perry, played by Wendy Moniz Grillo, continue to mourn John's passing. Jamie gives his consent to meet with the newly elected governor, Stephen Rawlings, who is played by Gareth Williams, in the expectation that he will remove the conservation trust that John had assigned to the Dutton land. Rawlings gives his consent, with the expectation of re-establishing the lease that was initially granted to Market Equities. Jamie wants the state to acquire the land owned by the Dutton family through the process of eminent domain, while Perry is of the opinion that they should not. To tell you the truth, she has decided to change her mind. Perry cautions them against turning Montana's Paradise Valley into a tourist destination similar to Jackson, Wyoming, also known as Jackson Hole, which is unable to maintain its existence independent of the tourism business. This is despite the fact that Perry was the one who initially struck the deal with me. Following Perry's decision to withdraw from the plans that Jamie and Rawlings have devised, John's old aide Clara Brewer, played by Lily Kay, does the same. She approaches the senator for employment because she is unable to work for a man who is eager to ruin all of the good that her previous boss had done. Perry is in agreement, but only after indicating that she ought to utilize her present unemployment position as a method to warn others, probably Kayce and Beth, about what Jamie and the incoming governor have planned for Montana, now that she is no longer bound by confidentiality agreements. Yellowstone Season 5 Episode 11 is the moment when Kayce finally confronts Jamie. At that point, a can of worms is finally opened for the first time. After arriving at the morgue, Kayce, who is eager to learn the truth about what happened to his father, insists on seeing both the report and the body being examined. Following his examination of it, he makes a request for a toxicology report, obtaining the authorization of Detective Dillard Rory Cochran. Kayce exerts a great deal of pressure on the medical examiner, Janice Everly, who is played by Vanessa Shaw, to carry out a new autopsy in front of him. When she does this, she notices that John has abrasions on his toes, indentations on his back, and bruises on his calves. She treats it as if it were a homicide, but only after Kayce had used some of his military techniques to establish a point. According to her admission, this does show signs that he was forcibly restrained, and she expresses her regret for having initially overlooked it. The response that Kayce gives is, "You're supposed to miss it." After saying that, Kayce informs Beth that he is required to confront Jamie. "You leave him to me," she implores, but her pleadings are ignored by the person in charge. Kayce forces his way into his brother's office and then throws Jamie across his desk with a powerful explosion. However, before he can take another strike, Jamie makes an effort to persuade Kayce that he was not involved in the death of their father. In light of the fact that he is no longer included in the will, his reasoning is straightforward: he would not gain anything from the death of their father. He explains, "I do not benefit from F. King Airport," and he is right. When you profit, the ranch also benefits, which means that you benefit. The advantages accrue to your son. Jamie continues his rambling remark by stating that he was equally as astonished to learn about what had occurred. "I don't have anyone to share my grief with. I don't have family anymore. I don't have anyone," he whispers to himself. It is unfortunate because he is correct, and despite the fact that he acknowledges that Beth has poisoned them against one another, he fails to recognize the implications of his own actions. In a final appeal, he makes an effort to persuade Kayce that the most prudent course of action would be to sell a portion of the land, pointing out that not doing so would result in the complete erasure of the Dutton legacy. It is at this point that Jamie conveys to Kayce that he continues to love him, and that despite their disagreements, he feels affection for their father as well. "I would never do something like that to you." In conclusion, he says, "I could never do that." Period of time. Kayce suddenly breaks her silence and says, "I hope not, Jamie," after continuing to remain silent throughout Jamie's whole tirade. "Yes, I do in fact. I say this for both your sake and mine." Following the departure of Kayce, the Helena Police Department issues a new statement to the public, in which they announce that the official cause of death for John Dutton has been altered from being a suicide to undetermined. An investigation into a homicide has been initiated as a consequence of this. When Sarah Atwood, played by Dawn Olivieri, hears the news, she becomes noticeably anxious. Meanwhile, her assassin Grant Horton, played by Matt Gerald, is seen calling someone about the news. This is not a good thing. As the 5th season of Yellowstone draws to a close, everyone is getting closer and closer to the Dutton Ranch. In spite of the fact that things are starting to look up on the front of the murder inquiry, the Yellowstone Dutton Ranch itself is being attacked in a significant way. During his speech to the Senate Assembly in Helena, Governor Rawlings not only reinstates the lease with me, but he also invokes the concept of eminent domain in relation to the Dutton property. Rawlings directs Jamie to withdraw himself from the investigation because of his intimate relationship to John's death, which is an even more serious situation. Despite the fact that Jamie subsequently explains to Sarah that only he, in his capacity as Attorney General, has the authority to disqualify himself, although a judge would also be able to do so. The adopted Dutton is tense because he was publicly called out in front of an entire branch of the Montana government. Kayce is informed by Beth, who has personally witnessed the gathering, that they have the option of either selling the ranch or losing it. As a result, the only choice they have is to determine which components they wish to sell and at what price. Otherwise, the entire thing would be taken away from them. The taxes alone are sufficient to sink them in debt. At that precise moment, Thomas Rainwater, played by Gil Birmingham, enters with Mo, played by Moses Brings Plenty, and expresses his heartfelt sorrow for John's passing. During the time when Mo is away with Kayce, Rainwater will remain behind in order to have a meeting with Beth. She conveys the profound respect that her father had for the individual, mentioning that she was always aware of the times when he did not respect someone. Even though Rainwater and John were frequently adversaries, Rainwater nonetheless deferred to John. The discussion does not shift to the future of the ranch until after this point has been reached. Rainwater continues, "I'm a realist. There's no way this place stays whole," and he gives an example. However, how much of it can carry on in its current state? Totally spotless. This is how it was when my grandparents were walking through it. He makes a solemn promise to assist in any way that he can, despite the fact that the tribal council has rendered him essentially powerless thanks to their decision to support Angela Blue Thunder Q Orianka Kilcher amidst the events of Season 5 Part 1. But Beth is of the opinion that there is no way to save the ranch, or even any way to preserve it. She believes that her father and her forefathers were naive dreamers who battled so hard to merely prolong its collapse. Since the 1990s, Bozeman has more than doubled in size, and she notes that Montana is expected to experience much more growth by the year 2040. Now we got a front row seat to its destruction, and there's not an AF King thing I can do about it, she comes to the conclusion. Despite this, Rainwater continues to provide any assistance that he can. But what was the destination of Kayce and Mo's escape? While they were out for a stroll, they talked about the vision that Kayce had in the 4th season finale, which was titled Grass on the Streets and Weeds on the Rooftops. Monica was informed by him at the time that the vision would be the end of us, and now we have a clearer understanding of what he meant by that statement. Mo was informed by Kayce that he is under the impression that he would be required to make a decision between his family and the ranch, which is not really much of a choice at all, according to Kayce. Even now, he has a hard time determining when or how to engage in such a decision-making process. "You're not supposed to know yet," Mo whispers to him. "Your time has not yet come. In the event that the time comes, you will be aware of it, and it will not seem like a choice at all. The feeling will be similar to that of fate." Mo tells Kayce that when the time comes, he will be able to look at her with a grin on his face, because the decision will be so obvious. Yellowstone Season 5 Episode 11 brings an abrupt and tragic end to the relationship between Jamie and Sarah. In a different part of the story, Sarah goes to Jamie's house after purchasing a prepaid burner phone. Despite the fact that she makes an effort to get in touch with Grant, every phone he has ever used has been disconnected. Jamie, who is now furious with her, comes just as she has smashed her burner phone, which causes her to feel frightened. He accuses her of putting the blame on him for John's death, and now his political shame. "What the FK have you done to me?" he asks her, blaming her for putting the pressure on him. However, Sarah advises Jamie to mature and to begin thinking like an attorney, pointing out that there is not a single piece of evidence that can be used to establish a legal connection between him and John's murder. She yells out, "I took all the risk, and I took it for you," referring to her encounter with Grant from the song Desire is all you need. In spite of this, Jamie claims that it was altogether due to the millions of dollars that she will make from Me's airport agreement. When Sarah makes the implication that Jamie wants the governorship so badly that he couldn't care less about the loss of his father, Jamie responds by slapping Sarah. She walks away after giving him a smack on the back. As Jamie is driving away, he phones Sarah and expresses his regret. In her words, "You have to start believing in yourself and trusting me, Jamie," she says. "At this point, you have nothing to be afraid of." But Sarah is completely and utterly wrong. At the very moment that she shares this information with Jamie, a couple arrives next to her and asks for directions. As it turns out, they are assassins who were most likely dispatched on Grant's behalf to sort out any unresolved issues. An instantaneous death occurs to Sarah while she is still on the phone with Jamie, who is able to hear everything and sheds tears. The film 353 started with the execution of John Dutton, and it finished with his death being avenged, and the person who had murdered him being slain by the exact people she had hired to kill him.